longer I'm out of the tech world, my involvement of it is just becoming more and more Neanderthal.
That's a great intro.
Yeah.
That's the first line of episode 0. Welcome to the Curious Hunter podcast.
Yeah, you want to listen to a couple of Neanderthals sit around and talk about, well, at least one. Me.
It's 2. You got 2 of us here. Well, here we are at Sheep's Head Outfitters in Paso Robles.
Hello.
This is Tim. Tim runs this joint.
Welcome to my home away from home. I'm here more than I'm home, but this is the Sheep's Head world headquarters that you're looking at. So
HQ.
Welcome. Yeah.
Yep.
And this is John. John, you're curious.
Howdy. I am curious, as are a lot of us, especially about hunting. So Tim, you have graciously invited us to do this in your space. Tell me a little bit more about yourself, how you got into hunting, why you decided to open this store.
I've been involved in the outdoors my entire life. I was fortunate enough to grow up in an area that I could roam around quite a bit, be it just hiking around and picking up rocks and, or actually going out there and learning how to catch fish or hunt dove. So it's always been part of my life. I spent the better part of the last 15 years in the corporate world. And when I no longer had that job, I decided I wanted to make the outdoor world sort of my full-time gig. And so Sheep's Head Outfitters was born from that. And I've been open here in Paso Robles, California for about 3.5, 4 months, going on 4 months, and I'm loving it. It's not without its challenges, as any entrepreneur or small business owner would know, but it allows me to build a place for people to connect over the outdoors. It doesn't matter what your passions are, be it you like to hunt elk or you like to fly fish for carp, or just go out and stargaze, or look at birds. This is a place for people to come and feel connected to the outdoors and be able to hopefully find some like-minded individuals. And I also happen to sell some really cool stuff too. So, but we'll get it. That's, I got to pay the bills, but that's sort of how this came to be.
Yeah. I love that when we first kind of started hanging out, because we just met right when you opened this place a few months ago through our mutual friend, Chris John. And I love that you were always about community and creating a space for people to hang out. And we even talked about how being in here kind of is reminiscent of being in a skate shop when you're a kid. So I can see how you're bringing those vibes. Yeah.
Or I think it's funny as we get old and our knees give out, we trade in the skateboards for the hunting packs. Oddly enough, maybe that's should be, that maybe doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah. But at the same time, I think there's a lot of us that, we're sort of peripherally on the not the mainstream when we were younger, and that might be another reason that I've always been attracted to the outdoors and outdoor pursuits and things like that. But I want this to be a place for people to come hang out and have a beer or talk about the season that is approaching or the pursuit that they just ended. So hopefully when people come into the store or watch this podcast, that they see that and feel that.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what, like you said, we kind of always lived on the outside of culture, even
popular culture.
Yeah, popular culture. Because, skateboarding definitely became a big part of culture, but it was still always something that was kind of on the peripheral, like you mentioned. And I think that, in a way, I didn't think about it until now, but I think that actually, that's why I think hunting became a little bit more interesting to me, because I was in the corporate agency world. I still am, full-time job at a creative agency. But I think definitely in that world, especially coming from the Bay Area, now living on the Central Coast, hunting is not something that is typically talked about in those circles.
Certainly not celebrated.
Yeah, not celebrated. I don't think that everyone is anti, but I think that it's just not a common practice.
Sure.
And so maybe there was something, looking at it in hindsight, that kind of drew me to hunting because it was very different than what a lot of people do. I think for me also, going into the pandemic, I actually was living here in the Central Coast. Right before the pandemic happened, I moved to the Bay to take a new job, which is the job I have now. And so we signed our lease. The next day it was stay at home. So essentially we moved from this really cool place in the Central Coast.
Oh, you signed your lease in
Yeah.
the Bay Area.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like right before. And I'm like, okay, well, 2 weeks,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
should be fine. We'll just
Yeah.
kind of chill in my house, this new place we were renting up there that, of course, the rent was 20% more than what we were paying down here.
minimum.
And then, we got stuck in our home for a year. So basically a lot more rent
Yeah.
in a bigger area in the Bay Area, stuck in our home.
A lot less open
And
space.
yeah, I think that kind of also gave me the itch of like, I need to get outside, but also I don't want to just go hiking. I want something more.
Right.
I don't think I got into it because I'm like, there's going to be a food shortage or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do think that may have played a role
Yeah.
in it. You hear people talking
Yeah.
about like, oh, hunting is important because what if?
Yeah.
Even though I didn't go down any sort of prepper path, I think that still was like, it just felt cool to be a little bit more self-sufficient.
Sure.
You know?
Sure. Yeah. No, it was nice in those early days of 2020 to just have to open my freezer, and it was full, and I didn't have to worry about battling open and close times at the grocery store or something like that. So yeah, can relate. And I think you're a creative person. That's what you do for your 9 to 5, and I think there's an element to outdoor pursuits that I think is attractive to creative people because we don't actually have much control out there. We can't control the elk, we can't control the fish, we can't control. And so as someone that is creative and is constantly like striving for like outside the box thinking and different things like that, I would imagine that that's attractive to you to be able to go into a situation and be like, okay, like I have to like relinquish my control here and just kind of go with the flow.
Totally. Yep. No, I agree. And I think also assuming before I got into this that I kind of had a persona in my head for the hunter. And I actually didn't understand how much of it was about eating the food that you hunt. I honestly had no idea. I thought, oh yeah, maybe some of them eat it.
Yeah.
But like mostly it's just because you want to put a head on your wall.
Right.
And then I start to learn, oh, there actually is, that is celebrating the fact that you are harvesting an animal.
Right.
And I think I saw the creativity in that. Like you're deciding where to go to hunt. You're deciding what animal to get. You're deciding how to hunt it.
Yeah.
Or fish or whatever. There just became so many options. A gun, a bow, fly fishing, deep sea, lake, like whatever. And I think that part of it, the gear associated with it, all of that, I think, to me, sort of lends itself to a sense of creativity because you get to choose which way to go, and there's so much to explore. And so I found that to be really interesting for sure.
And I think you said something there that like I'm finding more and more as people are becoming more excited about outdoor pursuits, it's becoming more about opportunity. I mean, I haven't put a head on my wall in some time, but the freezer's been full. And I think people are looking for opportunities. So they're sitting there and they're saying like, okay, well, so and so told me that like this is a great archery hunt or this is a great muzzleloader hunt, or if I take my fly rod to this stream that happens to have fish in it, I can take home some dinner. And I really love that aspect of the community of hunters and anglers because it's actually, I think there's still an anti-sentiment around like, oh, that you're out there to put a head on your wall. And I think actually no, I think it's polarizingly opposite. I think a lot of people are more just about the opportunity to experience something. Totally. And if that happens to yield some beautiful antlers to hang over the fireplace, then so be it. But that's I think certainly not most people's motivations, at least in the people that I talk to.
For sure. So. Yeah, and I've seen that too. And learning that stuff, learning about people in the industry, I think just really when you put actual people
Yeah.
in those places.
Yeah.
People talking about this, whether they're posting on Instagram or creating films and whatnot, on podcasts, falling into that world and learning from all these people really changed my perspective on what this was about, basically.
Yeah.
Following through on everything you're saying.
And so that kind of, I guess that would bring us to like the Curious Hunter podcast, and like, I'll ask you as the Curious Hunter, what do you hope that this podcast becomes or does or is?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Curious Hunter in and of itself obviously came out of me learning about this stuff a couple years ago. I'm 42 now, so I got into this when I was 40, and it was a really interesting, like, going over the hill and into the wild sort of idea.
Yeah.
And learning about it much later in life, I've heard it called a latent hunter sort of thing, is interesting. And I think that has happened with a lot of people around my age during this time because of the reasons I just talked about. And so through getting into that, there's been a small group of friends that I've started to band together with. We've been getting out, trying new things out together. Through this, that's how I met you. We've been making a few films and kind of documenting our experience, where it's not just us going, okay, let's just show what it's like to hunt this animal. I think if anything, the films are a lot less about that and more about what it's like to experience this stuff for the first time as someone who maybe is a little bit older, who didn't get into it when they were a kid with their family, on a ranch or something, which is super cool. But what's it like for someone else?
Yeah.
And not just that, but I think because of the circle that I kind of came from and in somewhat am still in, and I think a lot of the people that are starting to do this stuff with me, trying this stuff out for the first time, it's a way for us to, I think, break down some of those barriers so that people who might be like, like how I was, I want to melt every single gun. There should be no guns in the world because that's what I thought. And then going, oh, it's actually just a tool.
Yeah.
And so that was broken down for me, and I want to do that for other people.
Right.
Especially when it comes to hunting and harvesting food, so that those stereotypes start to fade away.
Yeah.
But even further, I think, and we were just talking about this earlier, right before we hit record, is that the world is not black and white, and you have to take a look at both sides of the coin. And so if we can encourage that sort of curious way to navigate through life, then I think we're just better as a people and as a community. So I think there's a lot of reasons, a lot of layers of why I want to do this, essentially.
Right. And I think we'd be remiss if we didn't touch on the fact that, like, one of the things that's really important to both you and I in this journey is conservation. And, there's certainly a lot of people out there that know a lot more about hunting and a lot more about fishing and a lot more about conservation. But if we can help to ignite a little bit of curiosity in other people about, like, okay, like, like, how do we have these trails? How do we have these parks? How do we have these places to go chase these animals and fish for these fish? And that is through conservation. And so it will. Is it fair to say that'll be a theme of the show as well? It'll be a constant sort of topic in here. And Sheep's Head Outfitters is 2% certified. So 1% of my time, 1% of my money goes back into various conservation organizations. And I think as a hunter and angler, that's probably one of the most rewarding parts of it is being able to give back to different organizations and maybe get some people involved that wouldn't otherwise have become involved, because conservation is something that is like everybody can get behind. Doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. It's sort of bringing people together and giving them a perspective they can agree on.
And I think that is another thing that got me really attracted to all of this, is learning about how hunters and anglers are very much in tune with that, not just in their own personal pursuits, but also how the system itself supports that. And I think that's something that I definitely want to talk about, whether it's having guests on or just, laying out something that maybe people who have just kind of seen what this is like from the sidelines, but they don't know a lot about, when you buy a hunting license or you buy ammunition or whatever, and the money of that and how that goes into conservation and what that looks like. And I think that is just another thing that when people learn about that, it continues to break down those barriers.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. So what can we expect? What can the viewers expect from the Curious Hunter podcast?
Yeah, I think that it's just that. It's having guests on who know more than we know. Because this is something that I know for myself, having just got into this, I'm going to be continuing to learn for the rest of my life. I mean, this really does feel like the next phase in life hobby. Like I'm starting the thing now that I kind of want to just do.
Yeah.
You know, it was skateboarding and things like that. And then break my knee and I can't do much.
Yeah. Now you'll do it on a mountain instead of a of a curb.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just a little less dangerous in some ways, maybe. But I think it's helping. The goal is for, I think, people who don't hunt and even seasoned hunters to maybe help remind people of what it's like to look at this stuff for the first time.
Yeah.
To learn from the experts, to show the variety of people that are invested in hunting and fishing and how they are conserving, how they are cooking, how they are creating really cool organizations to build these communities. I think it's just opening up that world for new hunters, for people that maybe just want to know more about it, even if they never hunt.
Right.
And that's great, you know, just to be exposed to something.
Yeah, and I think, you know, hunting and fishing specifically has always been shrouded in this aura of secrecy because you don't want to give up your spot. And there still is some of that, and rightly so. I've been very fortunate in my life to be around some amazing people who would rather have me out there catching fish than protecting their spots. Shout out to like Living Waters Fly Fishing down in Round Rock, or Alvin Dedeaux and Graham Jones. Those guys would rather that they tell me hey, go catch fish here, than not go there at all. So I think there's an element to what we're doing here about accessibility. And you know, we're not going to give you an Onyx coordinate or something like that. But I think, you know, making sure that people feel like, hey, this is something that I can go do too, or this is something I can participate in, or there's people like me who don't know everything. And I think making it accessible for those people is like we're doing a disservice to the industry by sort of making it this sort of elite and you know, only famous people with the biggest bulls and the biggest bucks can pursue it. And so I don't want to do that. And I guess the last thing I'll say about that is, like, as we start on this adventure of a podcast, we welcome feedback too. And we want to make sure that people know, like, hey, it'd be cool if you guys talked about this, or here's something that I'm like, as a new fly fisherman that I'm unsure about. Is this something you'd be like consider touching on?
Totally.
So
yeah, and I think even in regards to feedback and what people want to hear, I think also on the maybe the motivations behind hunting and bringing in new hunters itself is really interesting. Like where I'm at, and that may change, is I'm starting to see a benefit of more people getting like one animal a year versus a couple people, like you said, that elite, like, I'm going to get all the animals for myself. You know what I mean? Like, I think the more people that can participate in it in a sustainable way, the better hunting is going to be.
Right.
So I think, the 3 R's that you told me about a little bit, kind of understanding that, recruitment and retention and all of those things, I think is really great. And I'm curious to see how that perspective, because I know there's some polarization in the industry around that concept. And, however you feel about it, I think, not you, but just however anybody feels about that, I think it's an interesting conversation. And so I kind of want to dig into that a little bit and explore what the future of hunting looks like. Yeah. Especially because I do think it's going to grow. I think things like this are happening. We've seen the explosion of things like Meat Eater and certain people out there that have podcasts and films that they're making. I think we're going to see it grow. So how can we be a part of that growth in a responsible way? I guess it's something I'd love to see. And feedback is going to be important when it comes to
absolutely, that. Absolutely. So this is episode 0. And tell us about episode 1.
All right. So episode 0, It's Tim and I here at Sheep's Head, and the goal is to really just continue doing it here. With Tim and I, we'll bring in other people. There's a few people locally that are in some of the films I've been making who may be a part of this as well. We'll have guests kind of come on remote or in person. And the very first episode, number 1, officially is going to be right here at Sheep's Head this coming Friday, because we're going to post this probably today or tomorrow. We'll see. But the whole point is, like you said, building that community, having people come here, and not just to shop, but to do things like what we're going to do on Friday, which is screening the first 3 films that I've created as the Curious Hunter. So there's one that's a quail hunt film, there's a Baja yellowtail fishing film, and a surf fishing film, which was like right here on the Central Coast. So that's really cool. Eventually, I've been doing some hog hunting, so I'd love to do a wild pig hunting video at some point. And then just who knows from there on out. So this Friday is going to be a time where we throw a little bit of a party. There's going to be drinks. I think there's going to be some elk that's going to be cooked up.
Yeah, some various things.
So that'll be cool.
Yeah.
We're going to have a lot of giveaways. That hat and this hat will be part of that. So
Yeah.
Sheep's Head Outfitters hat, Curious Hunter hat.
Yeah, a few little
What else?
surprises as
What
well.
else? Yeah.
We'll have guests with us, so that'll be really fun. Live studio audience. So if we want feedback, I'm sure they'll give it to us like on the spot,
on the spot.
which could be a great thing. And then but just a time to come hang out and show your support for John and I, but also Sheep's Head and the Curious Hunter. And like we've been sort of preaching this whole time, like, if maybe you're looking for a new scene, or you're wanting to be part of a community, or you just need something to do on Friday night that's not going to the bar, come on down, hang out with us. You might walk home with some free gear and maybe a couple new friends or something.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, super excited about having these first 2 guests. So we have Natalie, who is a friend of yours that you introduced to me, and she's really involved with She Hunts, which is an organization that helps more women get into hunting, but they're learning from other women, which she said was just a huge benefit to her, and it was a really nice way to kind of start taking some steps into this. I think my wife is actually interested in doing that someday, so we'll see, but it'd be cool to hear her perspective. And then, is it Chad?
Chad, yeah. So Chad's the vice chair for the California chapter of Backcountry Hunters and Anglers. And we'll learn more about Backcountry Hunters and Anglers from Chad, but essentially they're an organization that's out there protecting and enhancing our access to public lands and public waters. So very important. Not all of us have access to lots of land to go enjoy the outdoors on. So to be able to go to the wonderful public lands that we have, not just in California, but throughout the country, is a pretty special thing. So Chad will talk to us a little bit about that. I think Chad's going to cook up some elk for people, and we'll learn a little bit more about backcountry hunters and anglers and what they're all about.
Yeah, super excited. Well, I think that's a good spot to end on.
I don't think we have anything else for episode 0.
Cool.
In all honesty, I thought we talked way more than I thought we would. So awesome.
It's perfect.
Yeah. Well, we'll see everybody Friday. Come hang out Friday and join us.
Yeah, we'll see you there.